Today is the last day for suggestions on ways to combat racial discrimination, xenophobia and related intolerance. These public submissions will be part of contributions by the Department of Justice to the draft National Action Plan. Earlier this year, there were calls to criminalise racism in light of racism allegations at Pretoria High School for girls. We joined in studio now by Neeshan Balton. He's the director of the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation. And we're also joined in studio by Sara, who's a research fellow at the Institute for Race Relations. Good to have both of you. Thank you so much for being our guests here on the program.
Thank you.
Now, all right, let's just talk about the issue of racism here in South Africa, because it is still a major issue. I mean, the events that have unfolded this week, I think just talk exactly to that. What do you think is the problem? I'm going to start, I'm going to ask both of you the same question. I'm going to ask you to be quite quick because we don't have too much time. But Neeshan, from your perspective, you brought this up a while ago, but why still?
No, it will be part of our country for a long while. You've had over 300 years of colonization, you've had apartheid. So whilst the legislative part of it has been dealt with, the social, the economic, the psychological, all of the other issues that made up the day-to-day life of racism still exist. And that requires much more work than just dealing with it from a legislative point of view. It requires the kind of work that we think must be done in schools and places of worship, and in places of work. But fundamentally, it also requires that we develop a set of tools to not only identify racism, but to begin to challenge it in all of its different ways, at an individual level, at an institutional level, and even at a cultural level. So I think that wide embracing approach to tackling racism and all its manifestations is the work that we now face. I think the legislative part of dealing with apartheid and racism is there. It's the after effects of that we now have to contend with. And that's why I think that we welcome the drafting of a national plan. That plan hopefully will be a South African-wide plan, not a government-owned plan, but one that will define roles and responsibilities for all kinds of sectors in society to make a contribution, and will also indicate what the priorities are as we move along and how we need to tackle this.
Yeah. Sara, I'm going to ask you the same question. I mean, especially from being from the Institute of Race Relations, you deal with this. This is something that you look into. At the bottom, at the end of the line, what is the fundamental problem in South Africa with its citizens?
Our research essentially shows that racism is not the fundamental problem. It is definitely a problem in the society, and we look at it from a slightly different view in the sense of, when we certainly are not greatly in favour of increased legislation to deal with it, because as has been said, it's not a situation that easily lends itself to resolving by legal mechanisms. And by this, let me perhaps give an example with the Penny Sparrow situation. By the time, before she got to a court, as a result of public opprobrium, which was natural and, dare I say, appropriate, she had lost her job, she had lost her home, she was essentially penniless. Now, that is a consequence of doing something in society to society that society abhors. In other words, I'm almost saying it almost didn't need the legal framework as well. The legal framework was added on top of it. And that is one way in which expressions of racism, particularly in the age of social media, get dealt with, and the consequences were severe. I mean, her name has become a byword for racism, and so it's not so much the legal framework we'd be looking at. We're more looking at issues of empowering individuals to deal with it, to recognise it for really what it is. And my other concern, in the counter to that, is that it is a very strong topic to explode in the media. And what we're afraid of is not only the racism that may be occurring, and we can talk about the Pretoria Girls' High situation, but accusations of racism, because they can also be so harmful. So you end up as a sort of double bind. And we believe that's about dialogue, about looking at creative suggestions and less so the legal.
You almost feel sometimes, however, that perhaps because it is not legislated, and perhaps because that the law is easy on those that are racist and do have these views and publicly make these views, that society just gets involved, and society just actually finds people guilty and destroys their life before anybody else can. And that's maybe why people do it. And they think, well, you know, I'm going. There's no law prohibiting me from doing this, so I'm going to do it anyway. Do you think a law will stop people?
I don't, because racism is a thought process. It's a frame of mind.
Yeah.
It's an individual feeling, and you can't control people's individual feelings. You can work to change them. You can encourage them to change them. And I think this, to the extent that racism is dealt with by courts, I think one area has to be added, and that is a mechanism to help change people's minds by exposing them to the people they supposedly hate.
Neeshan, you actually visited the school. You went to Pretoria Girls High. I mean, what was the sense there?
No, I didn't go there.
Oh, you didn't visit it?
But staff members of the foundation
Ahmed Kathrada Foundation went there.
Particularly the young people from our foundation went. And what they discovered there was that the things that we've heard about through the media and directly hearing it from young people from the school was first-hand accounts of the kind of racism that they did experience in the school, and some of which they articulated to the MEC. It's not only about the hair, but I think about children not being allowed to speak in the vernacular language. There's a kind of almost a call on to kids not to group themselves in particular racial groups, in a sense. So when 3 or 4 African kids get together, there's almost a sense of suspicion that they are plotting against the school. And it seems as if there's also derogatory remarks passed towards black children in particular about the way in which their hair comes across and their style of dress and so forth. And there's a sense of alienation from the kind of dominant culture within the school.
Yeah, yeah.
And these kids have basically found that they've reached a tolerance level that they can't deal with.
They can't take it anymore. I hate to do this, but I've got to end this interview. It's 7 o'clock. We've got to get to the news now. And I feel like we haven't even touched the basis of this conversation. Neeshan Balton is a director from the Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, and Sara is from the Institute of Race Relations. Thank you so much. We will invite both of you back in to complete this conversation. Let's quickly